Welcome to you, Rekha and Jeff.
Jeff, it's great to meet you.
Rekha, good to see you again.
And really honored to have this opportunity to speak with you and have our audience learn from both your really rich experience, whether it's leading a large organization or as a venture capitalist betting on the future, or as an author, and I can see the book in the background, and as a teacher. So before we start, just as context, because the last 18 months for all of us have reset both personal and business context, right? And we're all experiencing the new reality and a very rapidly evolving environment. And what's also happening is that from an industry perspective, the compressive technology transformation and the changed external environment, we're seeing very many new business models emerge, but also the need for new leadership to emerge, right? And we're hearing business speak to the need to build resilience, to the growing importance of trust, the need for a purpose-driven organization, for compassionate leadership. So with all that, want to learn from you, how do we navigate this new era, right? So let me jump into my first question. You took over as the CEO of GE on 10 September 2001. And the very next day, we had the terror attack, 9/11, right? And since then, you've been in the middle of many black swan events. So what lessons have you learned on crisis management as a leader?
So Rekha, it's great. It's really great to be with you. And, it's great to be with my friends at NASSCOM. And, as an American, we just had the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It brought back many sad memories and profound memories of most of us in that time. And I'd say, over from that to the financial crisis to COVID and everywhere in between, I think there's a couple lessons we can all learn. I think the first one is, in a crisis, good leaders absorb fear. Some people are fear accelerators. Some people are fear absorbers. And I think in a crisis, it's really important not to panic, to stay calm, to be truthful, but to give people a vision going forward. So absorbing fear. You have to make decisions. Frequently in a crisis, you have to make decisions with imperfect information, and that's incredibly important, and that you have to continue to move forward. You have to be able to compartmentalize so that you can address those things that are broken or those things that are affected, and stay focused on those things that aren't. And in the case of 9/11, commercial aviation was deeply affected, but healthcare was not. In the financial crisis, financial services was deeply impacted, but aviation wasn't. And so the ability to not let panic soak through the organization. But Rekha, maybe the most important thing is the ability to hold two truths, right? That things can get worse, right? But that there's going to be a future, and the people that have the courage to invest in the future are those that are going to ultimately win in the midst of a crisis. And one of the things that I'd say during COVID is that too few people hold that there could be two truths, right? So we over-indexed to take risk off. And so we're left in a world today with shortages everywhere, shortages of labor and components and things like that. And I think the ability to hold two truths is maybe the most important leadership value of crisis that we should focus on right now.
Brilliant. And I'm just thinking fear accelerator, and that's a very lovely word that I'm going to take away and use in the future. And also, as we went through the crisis, as personally, it so resonates with me. The other one I'd add there was leading with humility, because knowing that you can't take success for granted because you're working with limited information that's changing every time, and there are other factors beyond your control that can play a big part. And I know that's a theme that you've also explored in your book, Hot Seat, right?
Right.
You've also spoken about that there are several mistakes that you made during your career, as we all do. Would you want to share one mistake and the learnings from it that you feel are relevant for the current disruptive period?
You know, Rekha, like all CEOs, when you instruct me to pick one, I'm going to pick two. So,
okay.
you know how we are, given the chance, we always stretch. But I would say two that are meaningful for everybody today. You know, one is, at times I didn't take the time to think profoundly enough about a problem or a situation I was in. And I think we get trapped as leaders. We're prisoners of the moment, or we're prisoners of a crisis or a business cycle. And I would say when it comes to GE Capital, you know, over the course of the financial crisis and the 15 years I led GE, I'm not sure I ever stood back and said, hey, there's a completely different approach. And if we took a completely different approach, it'd be good for the people or investors or our customers. And so I think it's really important to think profoundly enough. You know, there's situations that everybody at NASSCOM lives in today. You know, like in other words, if I were in your shoes, I'd be thinking a lot about what digital transformation means to your clients. It's going to mean that BPO, as we know it, doesn't exist anymore, right? Think profoundly about that. Think profoundly about the notion that globalization as we know it is no longer, that we're going to live in a world where protectionism dominates every corner of the world, driven by cyber and other things. And so, you know, whereas NASSCOM benefited from the last generation of globalization, that doesn't exist today, right? So think profoundly, and that was a mistake I made at times. The other one is you can only be around people you trust, right? You always listen to people you trust. And occasionally, you know, I allowed myself to have a few people that I just didn't trust. You know, I was always paranoid about markets and competition. Sometimes I wasn't paranoid enough about thinking that one or two people that I just didn't respect or trust, that the rest of the team could compensate for them, and you just can't, right? So I would say stay paranoid about people and allow yourself to think deeply about two or three of the things that are going on around you. And those are two of the mistakes I talk about in the book of things I could have done differently.
Yeah, and we are well aware at NASSCOM of that, because we benefited during the pandemic because the world went digital rapidly, and there were no more boundaries.
Right.
So we've grown, but at the same time, to the protectionist tendencies you're talking about, absolutely very much there. And we need to, you know, keep that in mind as we plan for our future. And of course, the point about people and trusting your team, and therefore making sure that you have the right team, is really important.
Really key. Yeah.
You also run a class at Stanford, right, on system thinking, and you talk about choices. And in our industry, you know, the digital economy has really opened new dimensions, whether it's while it's creating new growth opportunities, and there are a number of technologies to choose from. There's also industry convergence. There are also blurring of different business models. So what advice would you give to our business leaders on making the choices? What can they focus on?
Yeah, so, you know, for 4 years, we've taught a class called Systems Leadership, and we really imagine it in the context of the digital transformation. You know, originally it was solely about digital and industrial and what would that mean, and that's by and large what the course has been about. We have 10 classes a year, and we bring a CEO in for each class. And I would say it gives me a chance to study other CEOs in a way that I couldn't really when I was at GE. And I would say the best leaders really focus on the and not the or, right? So we get taught that strategy is about choices, the or. You have to focus on one thing. The best CEOs focus on the and.
Stick to the knitting is what we were taught in business school.
Exactly. Stick to your knitting, and private equity people reinforce that and things like that. But I remember the class last year, we had the CEO of Peloton, right? And he said, look, his original venture investors, they always said, just do exercise bikes, right? But he got into content and media and backward integrated into production. And he always focused on the and he's built a powerhouse because of the way he's done it. So I actually think that strategy, particularly digital strategies, really facilitate, you know, the and. So look, if I sit back and think about classic BPO, the way I've known it, and then you think about new technologies like RPA, process automation, you know, that's an and, right? That's got to be something that becomes part of the business models probably going forward in order to establish real value. So I'd say be good at the end, know how to manage complexity and make it your friend. I'd say that's one thing. The other thing, Rekha, that you really see is the importance of timing. You know, in leadership, kind of the what and the how, those are actually easy to do. I think, you know, what you find as a leader is that the when, like knowing when to make a move, knowing when to add a capability, knowing when to build a system is actually quite important. One of the leaders I talk about in the class is actually Mary Barra at GM, who's actually been, I think, very astute from a timing standpoint of when to get into electric vehicles, when to get into autonomous and things like that. So I think the other thing you can talk about with your leaders is not just building a system and evolving with it as the markets change into new business models, but also knowing the timing that's going to be the most facilitative to driving change. And those are the two things I see in my class at Stanford.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And we are also seeing that because we're saying, one, everything is digital. There's a lot of data and analytics available. And so are you a entertainment company, or are you, you could also be a healthcare provider, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we are seeing that convergence, but also the and that you're talking about, right?
And I think, Rekha, you know, the companies that have won in this generation are kind of digital platform companies. So Amazon, right? Microsoft, they're building horizontal capabilities that can allow them to be the modern conglomerates, if you will, because at the backbone of what they do is either data or software or things that can facilitate the digital technology. I'd say the other piece to that is, quite honestly, when I think about legacy companies, you know, historically, if you put in like an ERP system or a CRM system, you know, you could offload all of that, right, into suppliers and things like that. But now data is differentiation. It's how you differentiate a locomotive or a media product or things like that. So legacy companies have to decide different make-buy strategies than they would have done when it was all about the backroom. You know, when it's all about the backroom, if you're a CEO, you don't care as much. But when it's about the services you offer your customers, you care a lot. And I think you're seeing more legacy companies wake up and say, not that they have to do everything themselves, but they need different partnerships with their suppliers in areas that are really going to differentiate themselves.
Yeah, we're seeing that because, so we represent the entire range. You know, we of course, we have what you call the legacy companies, but they are having to reinvent themselves completely because the imperative is very different. We also have the very high-end product companies. We have the startups. We have the BPO, what you call, and the operations companies. The whole range, but everybody is having to, one, reinvent, two, do ecosystem collaborations, because there is no way that you're going to be functioning in a silo by yourself. And talking of that, I mean, I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to talk about, since I mentioned startups, and you know, India is a huge technology startup hotbed for technology startup. We're the third largest. We've had a number of unicorns in the last 2 years. So my question to you, two questions actually. One was, wearing your investor hat, what do you look for when you're funding an organization? Both, you know, is it a business model? Is it the founder? Is it something beyond that? What is it? And second question, how many companies and startups in India have you invested in?
So I would say that the first thing I'd say, both in India but also globally, there's an infinite amount of money now to invest in startups, and there's an incredible opportunity to, let's say, attract talent in ways that haven't historically existed. So, being in Silicon Valley, you see the power of ideas, and you see the importance of starting new companies kind of de novo, and that's really critical. I'd say, big companies are formed by solving big problems. So the first thing I think about is how big is the problem? How big is the idea? And it's not that I wouldn't invest in small ideas, but I think it's always good to have in your own mind, are we building a small company or a big company? And what's the context for that? And I think that's incredibly important. And then the next part is really about the founder, and not so much. Look, I've seen so many talented people that I think is really, so gosh darn impressive, but can they scale, right? Can they go from, managing 10 people to managing 100 people, to managing 100 people to managing 1,000 people? And that's really hard, right? And so you either have to be with a founder who can scale, or you have to be able to bring in, kind of cores of management as time goes on, right? So if I think about, if I think about kind of the great Indian entrepreneurs of my generation, right? These are, the Premjis or Chandra or Ambanis and all the people that I knew who were part of big institutions, but they were incredibly entrepreneurial, and they were always learning. Like, the one thing I loved about going to India was we could learn from each other, and both of us wanted to learn all the time. What you find, Rekha, is some people just don't want to learn.
Right.
Graduated from MIT, they're smarter than I am 7 days a week, but they just don't want to. And so it's are they solving a big problem?
Are they solving big problems? Are
And
they
do they want to learn? Are they willing to
and do they have
scale
the
this?
ability to scale, and will they stay with it? Right?
Scaling is incredibly important. Small companies want to be big. Big companies want to stay small. So kind of the scaling and then reverse scaling is actually something I spent a lot of time thinking about as time goes on. So, and in India, look, over the years, I've invested in healthcare startups and fintech.
Okay.
Healthcare, I love India for healthcare because it's a consumer-driven model, and I'm convinced, maybe I won't be alive to see it, but I'm convinced that healthcare around the world is ultimately going to be consumer-driven. It doesn't matter where the market is, and so India is a precursor of that. In fintech, I just think fintech is we're still in early days, and is going to continue to just grow and prosper and be incredibly powerful as time goes on. So I think that's
I'm hoping, not I'm hoping, we know that India is going to be and is already one of the top 3 startup capitals, technology capitals in the world. And it's good to hear you talk about the fact that you've invested both in fintech and healthcare. And also because if we solve the problems here for our local population, we can always also solve it for the world. So in our case, we also have a test bed in the domestic market.
I think the best test bed, a great test bed, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I realize now that I'm being given signals that I have to wrap up quickly. So I'm squeezing one last question, because I talked about the need for purpose-driven leadership, purpose-driven organizations. And therefore, I just wanted to ask you if you'd share with the audience, what's your purpose? What's your personal purpose?
Gosh, in good times and bad, I've always loved people. I've always wanted to get the best for them, to get the best out of them, to be dedicated to them. And so, Rekha, when I used to, let's say, come to India, and I would maybe spend a week in India when I was running GE, I'd have 1,000 problems, right, that I'd leave behind. And I would celebrate just being able to interact and connect with people. So I think In my retirement, I do it with founders now. I do it with students, but I really, I want to, it's the way I can give back is by trying to, help people not make some of the same mistakes I did and getting the best out of their capability and learning to give back to the world. I say in my class, you answer 3 questions in a business career.
Mm-hmm.
How fast can you learn? How much pain can you take in good days and bad? And how much can you give to others? And if you can answer those 3 questions, no matter where you end up, you're going to be a success.
How fast can you learn? How much
pain can you take? In other words, if
yes.
you're living through COVID and things like that, are you willing to face the next day no matter what? And then how much can you give to others to make them better?
Brilliant mantras to live by. And with that, thank you so very much, Jeff, for joining us.
Again, and I hope to see you in person next year, maybe
Yes.
in Bangalore or wherever.
Absolutely. I look forward to meeting you and look forward to welcoming you to NASSCOM. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and great to be with you.
Thank you, Rekha and Jeff, for that very interesting and candid discussion. And as always, Jeff, it's a pleasure listening to you.